Today on Call for Two, Greg and I take to the skies to try the two-player cooperative dice placement game, Sky Team. You're watching Call for Two. I'm Jesse. I'm here with Greg.
Thanks for having me on your channel.
Before we get started with our review, let's go down to the table and see how this game plays. Sky Team is a short, two-player-only cooperative dice placement game with players attempting to land their planes safely in a variety of scenarios. It was designed by Luc Rémond and published by Scorpion Mask Games in 2023. It's a low-complexity dice placement and limited communication game that plays exactly two players and has a short playtime of 20 to 30 minutes. Setup begins with players choosing a scenario from the flight logbook, which controls which modules to use and the difficulty of the game, and then resetting the airplane control panel to its initial state. One player takes the blue dice, sits on the left, and plays the pilot. The other player takes the yellow dice and plays the role of the co-pilot. Gameplay takes place over the course of 7 rounds. At the start of each round, players begin by discussing their general plans. Then each player rolls their dice in secret behind their shield. Players then take turns placing one die on the board at a time until all dice are placed. Importantly, players may not communicate during the dice placement process. Most locations on the board restrict what dice can be placed there. Some locations are marked by color and can only be played by that specific player. Some locations are limited to specific dice values, and some locations must be played in a specific order. After placing a die, players take the action corresponding to that place. The radio tower locations are used to remove other airplanes in the flight path. The difference in axis dice change the angle of the plane. The sum of the engine dice advance the airplane's position based on the positions of the aerodynamics markers, which are themselves affected by the pilot's brakes and the co-pilot's flaps. Any dice can be placed on the coffee spaces to produce modifiers that can be used to adjust dice values on future turns. Expansion modules have their own special dice placement rules. At the end of each round, the plane descends one step closer to the destination airport. To win, players must reach the destination after a final 7th round, with the plane completely level and at low speed. Players can lose by overshooting or undershooting the terminal, hitting other planes, or going into a spin. The game comes with a special book of scenarios which makes use of a handful of additional modules and advanced rules that add variety and difficulty to the game by introducing additional tasks that must be performed during the flight. Let's start by talking about theme and components.
Something I am super excited about. I think I'm going to give away the end of my review here. But first of all, let's just talk about the components a little bit. They're really, really cool. There's everything's inset, and it's very intuitive the way everything's set up on the board. And like these little things, it's like the boom, little thing, lights and stuff that look like. I mean, there's even a pattern like the seat pattern on an airplane in these.
I didn't even notice that.
It's unbelievable, right. Yeah. Little airplane tokens that are serviceable and also look really good, and different modules here that we'll kind of get into later. Everything is very thematic.
Yeah, quick thing. None of it comes assembled. It comes with this big roll of double stick tape. You kind of have to bend and put everything together, put the sticker on the plane.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the best part, this clear sticker that goes on here, and the plane can show like whether you're banking or not, which is amazing and could look really incredible if you know how to put the sticker on. Yeah, I mean, all the components are very well done and very intuitive, so big gold star there. So let's talk about the theme, something that is so exciting in this game, because most people have traveled by airplane or are familiar with it. And there's a lot of like tropes and sayings, you can really get into the theme if you want to, of this is your captain speaking, and kind of get into that whole thing. Or, there's a lot of comedy movies and things that you can make jokes from, like Airplane, a very classic comedy and stuff. But one of the most exciting things for me is that and we'll get a little bit into these different modules, but there's a whole host of these different airports. And if you've been someplace that you have a personal connection to, like, like Oslo, we played on Oslo, and I was like, oh yeah, I went to Oslo. That was really kind of cool. It's exciting. And then also board games. One of the things that I love quite about board games is that you get to, oftentimes learn something that you don't know, or get excited about learning something that you don't know. And there was this one module in here for what was it, Jesse? The Paro, Paro, which is someplace that only 8 pilots in the world are, registered or educated on knowing how to fly. Certified. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. To go there, and that's pretty amazing, right? Like, that's a little factoid, and it made me like go and learn a little bit about, and that is so exciting for me in a game. So both bringing your own personal experience and happiness and excitement, and then also to to learn a little bit. The other thing is, like, everything that you're doing in the game for thematics is super thematic, and just from, like, that's part of the intuitive part of the game. If you're banking, you can't land the plane if your plane is cockeyed, but also and we'll talk a little bit more about the modules, but like, you want to be banked to avoid mountains and things like that in certain things. And some of these modules will add in things that are intuitive, that you understand what it's doing to your plane, pushing your plane, whether you want to slow your plane down, whether you need to get the planes out of your way. Really goes a long way to, like, cut down the bandwidth of playing the game, but also allowing you to understand the thematics and enjoy that in a thematic sense, but also not clutter your head up with a bunch of rules. So what a knockout of the park, these thematics. Very exciting. Obviously, I'm very excited about all that.
It's actually kind of surprising and strange, because I agree with everything you're saying. It's highly thematic. But if you actually look at it, it feels like on paper, it's almost an abstract game. It's like, and none of us fly airplanes. It's weird that it's so thematic. And I think perhaps part of it is that it's boiled down. You feel like you've got this control panel. And so even though it's very abstract, you kind of feel like you're throwing these, it's like I guess what I'm trying to say, it's thematically capturing the feeling of being in front of a control panel. That's what it feels like. And it does feel like you're in a plane cockpit and you have to do things right or you're going to crash. You feel like it.
Yeah, I think a game has to be abstract, and it has to just deliver. I think you've hit it on the nail on the head there. It has to feel the way that maybe the idea of it. Now, I did bring this game up. We played this one night, and the next day, one of my wife's friends came over, and I was like, I played this amazing game. It was so thematic. It was such a great simulation. And then I realized, I'm like, oh yeah, because I thought she would like that idea. And then I realized she repairs the, the flight simulators that pilots sit in to learn how to fly planes.
Okay.
And she works at an airport that does this. And I'm like, probably not as exciting as sitting in one of those. But let's go to the next move along, because I'm a little long in the discussion on this one for being excited.
Well, it's fine to spend some time here, because this was a very popular game at Gen Con, and I think just based purely on the feel of people wanting to feel like they're piloting a plane. And for bang for your buck, the amount of enjoyment thematically is huge. All right, let's talk a little bit about the actual gameplay. On the face of it, this is a game that the two of us should not really like. Don't you think? When we came into this, I was not expecting to like it. And why is that? First of all, it's dice placement. I'm not huge on dice placement. Dice in general feel like they're adding too much luck. But it's got a key thing in here which plays in a way that the two of us normally do not like. And what is that?
Well, we like the discussion. We like to talk about.
That's right. We like to talk and plan. And in this game, the dice are behind shields. Normally for me, I hate that. And that, they can watch a playthrough of this game. And we do a little bit of talking. We can't help ourselves.
A little more than
talking a little bit about strategy, not sharing information. But why does it work? I think there's one reason it works, and it's a point that you bring up over and over again when we play games. And you know what I'm going to say? Yeah. What's that?
No, go.
The length of the game. It's the length of the game makes most of this work. In fact, there are a lot of things about this game that would fall down if this was a 3-hour game, right? But one of them is the rounds are so quick. You've got 4 dice you play, so you're only taking 4 actions each round. You're alternating, so your turn comes very quickly. And because it goes so quickly, and then you can talk again between rounds, it's it's fine. It almost feels like we can still talk. We still talk a lot. It's just there are little brief periods where we're not allowed to talk. What's your thought on the talking thing?
It's a little awkward. I think I mean I love the gameplay of it, right? But like I think it can help people that don't like the quarterbacking thing. You and I like to discuss things so we don't care about the quarterbacking problem. However, it is such a quick game to play and you're kind of passing back and forth. And it's sort of like a Hanabi-ish type game where you're trying to intuit what the other player is. You're trying to gather information from unspoken signals and things. And I think that's kind of a cool part of it. But yeah, I mean I think again it is so quick to play that it doesn't really matter. It feels almost like a timed game in that way, in terms of
It
like
does almost
it's
feel
not at
like
all,
a
but
real time game.
although there is a module that
That's
will
right. One of the
create
modules just says you play with a time limit.
Yeah.
I think though there's something really fascinating about this game and the limited communication, and that is this. So you're not allowed to talk during your turns.
Mhm.
But it feels to me almost like the main interesting part of this game is trying to figure out the implicit communication. So you compare it to some other games where you're not allowed to talk, like Hanabi. But in Hanabi, there's not that much strategy to conveying information. You're making decisions, but you're...
It's the whole game.
Well, no, I don't think so. I disagree. I think here, every choice you're making is communicating some information. Like if I go here early, if I go here late, what information that's the printer. What information am I communicating by going here first before I go here? And to me, that's some of the most interesting strategy here, is trying to understand why you would go one place rather than another, and what is that communicating.
I think that's really a cool kind of aspect to it, but I also think that like you can make plans in that time, right? In that moment you have plans, like let's play this, this, and this, and this, and then you roll your dice. And it's not so easy because then you can't just play exactly as you want to do because you're constrained by your dice. Which I think, it's one of those things where like there's so many permutations. I don't think that like you can make the best plan and you can't know everything. And sometimes like we played a game where the last round everything was golden. Should have been fine to win, and we rolled like abysmal. And I think we had a reroll maybe, and we even rerolled, and there was no roll that was going to save us in that instance. We had the coffee being a nice way of I always like when there's a mitigating factor in games, which there is in this.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's absolutely true. There is a real luck element here, especially when you get to your final round. If you get very unlucky with the rolls, you could end up in an unwinnable situation. Although, as we've said, if it's a fast game, that's not so bad. I do think, though, you point out a part of this game that is missing, that would make it, that is going to limit its enjoyment in the long term, and that is, it does feel very much like a round by round tactical thing. You're not making long term plans in this game, right? You're basically just saying, we're going to move one or two spaces, we need to get rid of those planes. It's not like, here's our approach, we're going to take a totally different strategy. You're not like completely making plans. No, there's no real long-term planning in this game, which means it's not going to be the best of the games. It's more like a snack of a game, don't you think?
Well, I do think it definitely, I mean, this style of game, as we said, feels like a timed game, and as such, it's not the kind of game I feel like you can play. Like, I love it, but like, I don't think I could sit here and play 5, 6, 7, 8 games of this in a row.
Yeah.
It drains something out of you in much the same way a time game does.
I think that's
right.
right.
You play like a 20-minute, you're like, oh my God, that was so intense. Then you got to take a break. But that's fine.
That's right.
I think at the end of the night, or at the start of the game session, play 1 or 2 games. Fantastic.
Yeah, playing a couple games makes sense. I think you make a good point about the sort of the mental exhaustion and stress of playing it. Part of that is because it's so tense. Like, I love the rules of this game are like, if this happens, you die. If this happens, you die. There are all of these instant deaths. If the plane turns too much, you die. If you forget to put a die in one of these two places,
again, very
you
thematic.
die. If you get to the airport too soon, you die. There are all these ways to die, but it does ramp up the tension, and you can feel the time running out to do everything. So you've got it. It's tense. It feels tense for such a quick game.
I think in the playthrough, I was saying it's like James Bond's newest movie, 99 Ways to Die. Like, This features a lot of ways to get killed on a round by round basis.
So let's talk a little about variety and the scenarios in the rulebook. There's a rulebook, and then there's a flight log, which are all these scenarios. And the way the scenarios work is there's a big list of them. They're ranked for difficulty, and each scenario tells you what airport to use on which side, and then which modules to use. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the different modules.
Yeah. So again, for thematics, like, you know, it tells you a little story. You got a tailwind, you have like fuel problem. It tells you like a little story, and it's not a huge deal, but it's kind of cool. And then also for sake of ease of play, like they're all color coded and they on the top, so it's really, really cool. This has a very similar thing to what I often like in games, is to get good at doing a game and then adding new rules. Magic Maze comes to mind, which is another similar feeling game, which is a tense, no talking game. Actually, very similar in a lot of ways.
Interesting. Timed though, that one's
timed. But as you go through that, like a scenario will give you a couple new rules, and this is the same exact thing, which is so cool because it allows you to enjoy the game. And when you feel comfortable with it, you can add in these other modules that shake it up. It's like a little expansion in the box, which is fantastic. So, you know, there's a few different modules. There's this intern module where you're essentially able to use the intern to go and do tasks for you, but you have to train them. That's the trade-off by the end of the mission.
That one almost feels like it's a helper.
It is a little bit of a helper, yes.
The others don't feel that way.
This one here, there's two modules that use this, and one of them you're going to be using fuel as you would normally, and then there's another one that is a fuel leak, which is kind of cool because that's a bit of a difference. We actually did not play this one yet, which is the ice breaks. So that's you're landing on an icy runway. I'm excited to try that one. And then the one that I thought was really kind of cool is this one here, where depending on how your plane is facing, and you can change its facing using the regular mechanisms of the game, it will add to your speed because of the tailwind, or it'll reduce your speed because you're going into the wind, which is a really cool part of it.
That one's almost the closest one to doing long-term planning, because you're like,
true.
Let's get ourselves with a nice tailwind, although it did feel like it might be a little more sort of random.
It does give you a couple of things where there's this black die, and then some of these, depending on where you are, it will add more planes, like if you know, which is thematic because planes are coming in and out and you don't necessarily know where they're going to be, and so you have to when they come out, you got to plan that you're going to have to get rid of more.
There are lots of little dials on here. One of the interesting things here is you can go 2 spaces, you can go 1, and this adds this element of if you can time it right and get ahead 2 spaces, you skip having to do that,
which is really cool. And then lastly, on some of these, you'll have to be in specific headings to avoid, which I would guess is like going around the mountains and things like that, or buildings or whatever, any kind of natural land features that you have to avoid and stuff. And so the lastly, one last thing is that the length of these flights are different. So there's a lot of ways they can make different stuff. And actually, Jesse you got an extra little module from Gen Con. And it seems like that's a really easy expansion to like, you could homebrew, or you could make, so super fun, a lot of variety, and you can go through them in order. You can jump around to try to, try different modules, which is what we were kind of doing. But it's a natural progression of like trying the easier ones and then getting really a lot better and naturally facing.
And I do love that you can, it's not just their variety, they're difficulty rated. So if you get good at one, you can go to another one. And then there's these special ability cards. How many are there? It looks like 6 of them, single-sided. And one cool thing is that the scenarios tell you how many you get, but the game tells you guys pick which ones you want to bring in. And we've played 2 now, and the first one we played says when it's your turn, you can re-roll 1 dice. That was good. That was simple enough. Then we played a second one, and I think this captures this is such an elegant design, such a beautiful, clean design. But I want to talk about this one again because I think this captures what really makes this game sing for me. So this one says, once per round, at any time, so not even on your turn, a player may place one of their die on here, and then the other player, at that point, puts one of their die, and then you exchange numbers. So, for example, if I needed a high number and I only had lows, I might put a low number, and then Greg might put a high number, and then okay. So when we started playing, that's how that looked like that was going to be used. You need a high, you don't have them, you trade it. And if you watch our playthrough, a fascinating thing happened, which is that we realized we could use this card as a sort of coordination communication system, that it might be more valuable to use this as a way to actually plan out a move rather than fix a die problem. And we started using this, putting the same numbers on.
Yeah, so if I had 2 5s, I could give Jesse a 5, knowing that we could stay in the same orientation or whatever.
Right. Or, I mean, you would think, why would you ever both put the same number there? But the truth is that just putting those numbers there between turns is a huge way to communicate information. Like, we both now know we have ones, we can do stuff with that. And that, for me, that happens over and over in this game, where you're sort of communicating information, and a lot of it is timing information. You're communicating timing information. But maybe I've jumped ahead from the modules. Anything more to talk
I think
about
it's really
with the
cool
modules?
that you can pick which module. They don't seem to make a huge difference, but at playing that was something neat that we kind of figured out. So I think maybe there is some more depth there that you don't see right at first blush.
So we've played this maybe half dozen times, maybe a little bit more, and we're still learning protocols, right? It feels like this is a game where different groups might, a little bit like Hanabi, develop certain protocols. Like, when I do this, I'm telling you something. If I go here early. And one of the enjoyable parts of playing with you is we're figuring those out. And sometimes you're getting a little mad. You're like, you just went someplace that's causing some trouble. There's a little bit of push your luck. One of the things, though, and I feel like we are getting a handle on that. One of the things I'm not sure we have wrapped our head around completely is the communication between rounds. What do you have any thoughts on that? Is there a better way to
I think it's
make
kind of
plans?
it's tricky because you don't know what you're going to roll and you can't talk about it, and so you're not supposed to speak at all. And again, like, sometimes it's not for strategic reasons. I just want to be like, oh, that was kind of a cool move I made.
Most of the time, that's what we want to talk about.
Out, you know? And so games are social. And so I think that's the only really knock I would say against it, you know. And the other thing is, like, that Shadows or Camelot thing where, like, I can't say 6, but I can say, like, I have a very good chance of doing, you know. So I don't like when they have that kind of thing in games. So you're not supposed to talk about specific die roll numbers.
Even during the planning stage, you're not supposed to plan,
like,
if you get a this.
Because, you know, you want to be like, if you can get rid of this plane early, do it. And it's a 2. So you know you're talking about 2s. That's something that I always find a little bit strange in games. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's
yeah, I mean,
it's so fast to play that it doesn't really matter.
It's true. I kind of wish, I mean, we're developing our own little house rules, informal rules for what we're allowed to talk about. I feel like that's not a terrible idea. I wouldn't mind if they had like a variant that said, here are the kinds of things you could talk about. I did remember one other thing I wanted to talk to that's so elegant about this design is that if you were designing this on paper, you might say, okay, everyone places their dice and then things happen between rounds, right? Like, it tells you between rounds the airplane descends. That's all normal. But then there's a little clever thing, 2 places where things get clever. And I do think it shows you the emphasis on timing is so strong with this game, which is that
timing.
The moment both dice go here, you move forward. Yeah. And then when both of these go, the thing turns right away. So you're starting to think, like, should we try to move the engine first before we adjust our angle, or should we do the angle first? And then when you put die here or here, you're messing with the speed you'll go. And there's some fascinating, agonizing decisions. If you watch our playthrough, it slowed me down.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Because I'm agonizing over, you got 2 dice, but if you do this, you mess up this, and then the other person can't go. Yeah. Those timing things in this game are really satisfying. You made a couple
of really good points, and I can't remember the first one was. I didn't want to interrupt you, but this was another good one that you made. But yeah, that's a huge difference. I think that changes the game completely.
It really does.
Because you're like, I'll go here first so that we move, or we go here second because we don't want to move, and, you know, that's a huge deal. And again, and you were like, you might move a space, and you hold on to your 1.
That's
to
right.
get rid of a plane
That's
because
right.
you know you can't do anything with it
This
now.
changes, and then all of a sudden, what you can
The
radio.
puzzle, it's like the puzzle's
And
changing
not
in real
only
time.
does that happen with those specific rules, every turn you're like, if I put this here first, like
Mhm.
if I know what I'm going to do, and you've
Mhm.
already gone here, you're done with that area. And so should I do this now so you can see I can do it? Or
Yeah.
should I wait? And you're also, the way that also comes into play is you're dealing with this coffee. You're dealing with
Yeah.
these mitigation factors, and you're thinking, should I be,
Yeah.
should your action have told me that
Yeah.
you're having a problem in this other area that I need to help you with? That's what's
you
rattling
hold,
around
you
in your
hold your die
head.
back and you think, they haven't placed there yet. Maybe I should be safe and put it in the coffee. Boom, get me a coffee because you don't want the other player. You think the other player's having trouble placing.
I think that's really part of why this game is enjoyable. It's not just, you're not just worried about your turn. You're constantly worried about what position am I going to put the other person in, and can I pick up that they're going to have trouble in a certain area. That's
we
very
also
satisfying.
counted up like the amount of dice placements you have to make and stuff. And I think on one of the last game we played, which was this Haneda, like I think it was like 28 possible placements, and you have, or it was 25 necessary placements that you had obligatory, and there was like 28 dice total that you
somewhere
have.
between
So it's
3
like a
and
very,
5
like
free
like
things.
So it can
everything
be,
else.
Those later ones, it can be very, very tight, meaning your decisions have to be very, very
Yeah.
I got one more thing I want to talk about before we go into our final thoughts, if we can.
Yep.
So, and I'm so glad you forgot about this because it's a point I made and I was very excited
I
about.
haven't forgotten.
Okay. So this game is wonderfully innovative. And one of the most exciting things, again, about board gaming and things like this is when it gets your creative juices flowing and you think about what, like when we play Chronicles of Crime, that's such an innovative game. What else can you do with that system? And can you imagine a game like this where there's the two of us versus two other people and you're playing like a starfighter and like you're an X-Wing or something and you're maneuvering around and miss the other person's shots and you're shooting at the other person and you're playing the same kind of game. I kind of think of like Space Cadets Dice Duel was sort of not killed, but had a lot of competition Captain Sonar. And I'm wondering like if that kind of game, it's like that same kind of style there. I mean, because you could do all kinds of stuff with this. You could do boats and ships and like different. I mean, what a great system like that. This could sort of be a jumping off point for.
I think we're going to see evolutions of this system in lots of different areas. Your suggestion of actual like dog fighting. You made a couple suggestions. One is team versus team would be fun, but also just adding some combat flight stuff.
Oh, like some AI.
That's right. That's right.
Sure.
Or just any machinery that has a captain. We haven't even talked about the split between captain and co. Let's talk about that in a second. But anything where you're focusing on a control panel, submarine would be a great theme setting for this. And we've played a couple of space games. We played Apollo, and like this, they don't hold a candle to this. And it's such a boiled down game. I would love to see this rethemed, made a little more complicated with different modules of landing. Landing Apollo in this.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, in a 20-minute game like this, I think when you add too much meat on the bone, it gets into that zone of not being fun anymore. I think it's kind of in that happy spot of. But again, not to get too in the weeds, but like, what a great jumping off point, for any number of things like the trench in Star Wars. You're shooting TIE fighters. I mean, you could even just retheme this and I don't think you should because this theme is so amazing. But yeah, that's a pretty cool part of this.
Before we get to final thoughts, I wanted to mention one more thing that I talked about a little bit when I did a roundup of this with my Gen Con games. Some people really don't like the idea that there could be alpha players in games. They talk about it. They say this game doesn't fix the alpha player. Now, the two of us don't care about that. We want to discuss. But some groups don't like when someone can bully and tell someone to do. And one of the nice things about this is there can't be an alpha player. You don't have access to the other player's dice. You can't tell them what to do. So I think if your group cares about that might bother you. But there is a downside to that. And that is you really have to be fairly equal skill levels to play this game. And this is a fairly deep game. So this is going to be a game that like
Well, that's not true. We do pretty well, and
this is going to be a hard time for like a parent to play with a kid. You can't help it. So you're basically two equals. All right, why don't you give us your final thoughts?
This game, it's hard to imagine a more innovative game, a more thematic game. Like, incredible. What an incredible achievement. It's short, quick to play. It's, it's fun. It's fast. It's an easy 10 for me. Like, the components, everything, like going through this like sort of mini campaign. It has the best parts of being able to go through a campaign and try different modes while not being like so, crazy that you're never going to open that Kickstarter box, and like, so yeah, easy 10.
I mean, I agree with you. I would also rate this a 10 for what it is, for the niche it occupies. A fast, tense, exciting game with deep, surprisingly deep strategy and implicit communication. It is sort of surprising to me. On paper, it doesn't look like it should be that good, and it's got lots of features that don't look like they should work for us. But it is a sort of masterclass in elegance, simplicity, and I do think this is going to be a system that we see more spin-offs of, and I can't wait to try them. All right, well, if you like this video, you might check out our playthrough to see what the game feels like. Not to watch it for enjoyment purposes, but to see what the game feels like. I'm sure the two of us would also love to hear how people feel about this game. Does it work for you? I'd love to hear if it doesn't. Like, if you're one of these people that says this didn't work for me, I'd love to hear why.